Hello, I'm Dr. Sherry, your onboard ship storyteller, and today I would like to sail into Bergen, one of the most beautiful harbors in the world. And to do so, we'll go to Cruise Through History Storybook, Itinerary 12, Ports of the North Sea, for stories of Bergen and Norway. I love to sail into the Bergen Harbor first thing in the morning, and you want to be on the deck of your ship as it slowly comes through the fjords, passes the final fjord, and slips into the Bergen Harbor. And there in front of you is an entire vista of the tumultuous history of Bergen, peaceful, quiet, colorful today. Look up at the hills. In these hills, Vikings held their first things, sometimes called pings, the first instance of a democratic government. In the valleys beyond these hills are the stories of trolls, and we'll save the stories of the secret lives of trolls for another day. But today we're going to look at the history of the city as it plays out in front of you as your ship comes in toward the pier. Olaf III founded this city. He was the last of the line of the sons of Vikings, and they decided that rather than send their young men out on raids, they'd actually bring them home and prosper in a port open to trade. This was the beginning of Bergen. And you can see the storehouses, the wooden storehouses of Hansa. Hansa were a German trade consortium that came to Bergen in about the 12th century because ships laden with goods were subject to pirates and they needed places to store their goods while they're waiting for market day. So the Hansa merchants made arrangements with the King of Denmark. Yes, Denmark, because Denmark controlled Norway in the 13th, 14th century. And the King of Denmark gave wonderful trade treaties to the Hansa, and they literally took over the port in Bergen. They built these wonderful storehouses with places to stay behind, and then they brought their guilds. And the German guilds of shoemakers and candle makers and various craftsmen and goldsmiths, but the guilds excluded Norwegians. And so when the Bishop of Bergen spoke up and said, you've got to allow Norwegians into your guilds and you've got to allow the Norwegians control over their fish, Hansa responded by issuing an edict that no guild member would sell shoes to a bishop in Bergen. And if any Scandinavian king tried to oust the authority or diminish the authority of Hansa at its height, they would simply barricade this small harbor that we're coming into, this perfect little horseshoe of a harbor, and all trade ceased. Well, Hansa met their match in Olaf Nielsen. In the 1400s, Olaf Nielsen was appointed by the King of Denmark to be the law enforcement authority in Bergen. And he was in the stone fortress of Bergen. Now, Olaf Nielsen had the idea that if he was in charge of the law, then everyone should abide by the law, including Hansa. And of course, that didn't sit well with Hansa. They played by their own rules. And so they looked at Nielsen as a fence. And so they implored the Danish king to relieve him of duties and replace him with, of all things, a Swede. And the Swedes were the historic enemies of the Norwegians. Well, Olaf didn't take this sitting down. He hopped on a ship, became a pirate, went over to the Swedish border and captured a Swedish town. And then he told the Danish king, if you want me to return the town, you've got to restore me to my duties in the Bergen fortress. And the king did. And Olaf came marching through the streets of Bergen where we walk today. And the Hansa were amazed and upset. And so they decided that Olaf Nielsen had to go, and there occurred a battle, such as the city had never seen. Olaf and the priests of the town, because the Hansa had taken the Catholic churches and used them for Lutheran churches, and we see the church also down by the harbor. And they battled through the streets, Hansa versus the citizens of Norway. Olaf, the bishop, and many of the supporters perished in that battle. Well, the Hansa weren't satisfied. They went through the streets of Bergen, where we walk today, and made sure they rooted out any supporters of Olaf and went to his house and trashed the house. Well, Olaf's wife and young children were there. And when those children grew to be older, the children and the wife, Olaf's son, daughter, and wife, each commanded a ship, and they became pirates, and they harassed Hansa in the bay where you now quietly sail in to your dock. As the years progressed, relations between Bergen and Denmark improved, and Hansa was in its descendancy. In 1530, the King of Denmark sent a new governor, a fair governor, to Bergen, Erik Rosenkrantz, and he built the Rosenkrantz Tower. He was such a promoter of buildings, preservation of the city, that he restored many of the Hansa buildings and certainly elaborated on the fort, much bigger now today than it was during the time of Olaf. And all of these buildings stood. The cityscape of Bergen in the 12th century was very much the same in the 20th century until World War II, when a Dutch ship was at the dock full of munitions and an accident occurred and a huge explosion flattened so many of those historic buildings. Well, they were restored as they were during the Hansa and Olaf era for you to enjoy today. And this harbor is now a World Heritage Site. So as we go further into the harbor, look at the building at the very tip. It was the fish market then, and it's a great place to have a fish dinner today. And behind that on the street is a statue to a great writer born in Bergen who wrote of the history of Bergen. This was Ludvig Holberg. Behind him you'll see a museum and it says the arts, because the arts have been important in Bergen for centuries. They were encouraged by the kings of Denmark. Craftsmen in Bergen sent carvings around the world that graced churches in Germany and in England. Everywhere knew the fame of the Bergen artisans. Ludvig Holberg was born in 1684. He was educated in Europe, and he wrote in Danish because Danish was the official language at the time. But he wrote of characters from Norway, from the hills and from the legends. He preserved the history of Norway in his writings. The arts have always been strong in this area. It looks like a tiny, colorful Lego village massed around a lake. The lake was very important in the history of Bergen because the water was needed to put out fires when buildings were made of wood instead of stone. And around the lake today, there are 4 museums. They're known as Kode, K-O-D-E. And these each have various galleries of lifeways of Norway and of Norwegian artists. As we come around the museums, we'll see a fountain. And at the top of that fountain is Olaf Bull playing his violin. Early 19th century Olaf Bull loved to play his violin, and he played for the children of Bergen. You see him in this fountain with stepping stones on the bottom, and children love to play in those stepping stones. It's as if Olaf Bull is eternally playing for the children of Norway. And from the museum district, across the fountain, up to the other end of this short street, you're walking Olaf Bull Place, Olaf Bull Place, and you're looking at the theater district. It is in this theater that Holberg's plays were produced, and one of the theater managers was none other than Henrik Ibsen, There's a rather unattractive statue of Henrik Ibsen in front of the theater. There are 4 theaters clustered in this small area on Olofbolplatz as you walk from the museum up to the theater district in this lovely little section of Bergen. So many stories in the history of Norway. So many stories in Bergen itself. We haven't even talked about the trolls, and you can see wonderful examples of troll art. These are not the comical, terrifying trolls. These are sensitive creatures of the earth depicted by the artists from Bergen. And the story of trolls, the secret life of trolls, is a story for another day. So we'll leave Bergen today. So many ports, so many stories. Until I see you again on ship, be well.